Hi, I'm Michael Killen, and my guest is a little strange. He is a man who wants to mine in the sky as opposed to in the earth, including in the oceans. And I tend to believe he is on to a great idea. He is Art Burtis. He is the CEO of Solar Air Tech LLC. Arthur,
Michael,
how are you?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself? It's a pleasure to be here with you.
You think that's a little wild that I start the program by saying you want to mine in the sky?
No, I think it's a wonderful definition of what's going to happen.
What is in the sky,
Carbon dioxide.
and why would you want to mine? Why would you want to collect that from the...
We can pull the carbon dioxide, myself and associates, we can pull the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and then we can take and we can turn through associates and other types of arrangements, the carbon dioxide into fungible drop-in gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel.
Let me interpret. Not that you really need to be interpret. You have discovered that in the air there is carbon dioxide. And if we go to Berkeley, a whole lot of different places, and all the scientists around the world will say there's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and it's increasing. And you brought to my attention that powerful organizations around the world and people recognize that there's too much out there, and they're looking for ways to remove the carbon from the atmosphere.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I, in Solar Air Tech LLC, invented and own the solar air tower chimney, which moves massive quantities of air. It also creates electricity, and it captures condensation to make potable water occur. But for this particular interview, what we really want to talk about is pulling the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And there are other organizations, not my company, but other organizations whose products can do just that. They can literally separate the carbon dioxide as the air passes through their apparatus. The secret and the wonderful thing about my solar air tower chimney is that it moves this air to be able to make it pass through their systems to pull the carbon dioxide out of the air.
So I've noticed you are an expert building chimneys and towers, and and very, very knowledgeable about airflow. And I guess in building these chimneys and towers, you somehow or another stumbled on the realization about the status of carbon in the atmosphere. And I guess the air goes through your tower, there's chemicals in there, the chemicals grab the carbon, hold it into some kind of device, and then maybe at the end of the day, at the end of the week, there's a way of taking all that carbon, putting it in a tank, put more in, compressing it. Is that basically the...
In a nutshell, that's a good description of it. Do remember now that the airflow that my solar air tower chimney creates is what my solar air tower chimney does, is create massive airflow. By the way, it's all created through solar energy to do that.
Oh, but I got a problem with solar. It only works in the daytime.
Well, we have heat sinks that will be built underground, where we'll take and we will remove the heat that's in the heat sink, which is brought in by the sun during the day. And when it becomes dark out, then we will take and we will funnel from the heat sinks, we will release the heat back into my solar tower so that it continues to move its air through.
Well, that's an interesting idea. That's very interesting. Okay, and then if it's a long night, or if the day before didn't produce a tremendous amount of solar energy, you could have a pump, some kind of energy source, other energy source helping.
We could also have a heating source that could be utilized. That would utilize actual electricity from other sources, outside sources like the grid, to be able to create the electricity to move the air through the system. But the locations where we will set up the solar air tower chimneys will be locations, of course, that have a predominant amount of days that are sunny and not cloudy. We're not going to put it in rainy, cloudy locations. And one point I want to impress to everybody, and yourself included, is that although we move all this air and we generate electricity through turbines that are inside our system, and we collect the condensation to make potable water that comes out of the air that moves through our system, the separation of the carbon dioxide is accomplished by other organizations' apparatus. Sure. And they and we will work together to make that happen.
Yeah, so this is a systems
yes.
approach. So I read or learned from you that in air, right around here, 0.01% of the air contains carbon dioxide. So that puts it in a category of low concentration carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
And I've learned there's other situations where there is a greater concentration of carbon dioxide in the air. Like, for example, at the end of a tailpipe of a car, or in a smokestack.
True.
But you are focusing on the requirement where the concentration is not that great. And now I wonder, let's say the Arctic is melting, and is it peat moss, tundra that is being exposed, and it's releasing a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide. That's not a tailpipe, or if it's a tailpipe, it's a gigantic one. But we don't have any means of putting something on top of all of this land to separate the carbon from the air.
True.
So there are these applications that are not what we call a fixed point application, like a smokestack. So your air capture solution is aimed at these other types of requirements to where there's an opportunity to remove the air.
Yes, and my solar air tower can be set up in my solar air tower chimney can be set up in so many different locations in the world, and they can be set up so that they are in one very large solar air tower, or they can be set up in where they are groups of smaller solar air tower chimneys that work in with each other to create more and more draw of the air for the carbon dioxide to be taken out of the atmosphere. The reason the carbon dioxide has to come out of the atmosphere, because I mean we all know that carbon dioxide is going into the atmosphere from our tailpipes in our cars, from cement plants, the exhaust from coal-fired electrical plants. And we're also hoping that everybody does their absolute best to figure ways to capture as much carbon dioxide as possible out of those exhausts from the large exhaust from the electrical plants, etc. But it's already in the air. What used to be levelized out at somewhere around 250 parts per million. Now we're running into the 400 plus parts per million. This all came about in the last 50 years. Actually, it really started about 1950 when the whole world really got into doing things after World War II. And we have so much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere now, and by the way, carbon dioxide is an automatic absorber of solar energy. We have so much carbon dioxide, so much extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that the planet is warming because the carbon dioxide is being warmed by the sun. We have to reduce the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. not just the ones coming out of the chimneys.
Yeah, and picking up on what you said, but most of the effort, most of the discussion today is to try to reduce the amount that is going up.
Yes.
And are we winning that battle?
Well, that's, you can look at that a lot of different ways. I've heard a lot of different stories about whether or not we're winning it. In one way, we're winning it in that we are making it more efficient to capture the carbon dioxide as it goes out of the chimneys in some of the locations. And in another way, we're losing it because our world is constantly expanding with more technology, more portions of civilization are becoming industrialized, more cars are being built. So we're still losing the battle into this effect. Approximately, and this is not a rule of thumb or anything else, it's just an approximation, 2.5 to 3.5 parts per million are added onto the already existing part per million count, which is over 400. Soon, not too far from now, we're going to, when you figure if we're increasing let's just say an average of 3 parts per million per year, you multiply 3 parts per million times 10, and you get 10 years, and you've got 30 extra parts per million. Multiply that times 3, and you've got 90 extra parts per million. Now you're approaching 500 parts per million. Yeah. Some of the scientists say when it hits 500 parts per million, the Earth will have warmed enough to literally affect, in a major way, the trade winds and the oceanic currents. Now, if the trade winds and the oceanic currents begin to actually change their position and their trajectories, oh my goodness, our seasons will completely change.
Okay, so you said a lot of good things, but let me just underscore, you agree most of the effort right now is with energy efficiency, with batteries, with all other things, is to try to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and others that's going up.
Reduce the emissions.
And the emissions are increasing.
Well, they're reducing the emissions per unit, but the per units are increasing. In other words, how can I say this so it's completely understandable? If you take 100 cars and you reduce their emissions by 10%, that's a big number. By 10%.
But there's more cars.
But then there were 200 more cars that were made that year.
Yeah. So, but you are an activist who wants the world to recognize there are ways to draw down what's up there.
Yes.
And that's why you're mining the sky.
Yes.
You want to grab as much carbon dioxide from up there and sequester it. But if I understand it, it's an expensive process of taking it down. And I mean, when you get this carbon dioxide, what are you going to do with it?
Well, sequestration of carbon dioxide is extremely expensive. Actually, it's a kind of a dead-end street because you pull it out, and it costs money to pull it out of the atmosphere. Then you have to take and you have to pump it into salt mines or vacant oil mines or whatever. But we can take and we can turn, I say we, myself and my associates, my company and other companies, in other words, can take and we can turn that carbon dioxide into literally gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, which becomes a full cycle system. So if I could just use this little show and tell here. The planet with the atmosphere, the exhaust goes into the atmosphere, we pull it back out of the atmosphere, we turn it into gasoline, the exhaust goes back into the atmosphere, we pull it out of the atmosphere, we turn it into gasoline, it goes back in the atmosphere. It's a full cycle system. In other words, it's carbon neutral in that there's no new carbon occurring because we're working completely under solar power. We're not working under fossil fuels powering us. Now, fossil fuels such as oil and coal and natural gas, but particularly oil because we're talking about producing liquid hydrocarbon fuels like diesel, jet, and gasoline. Fossil fuel, when it is extracted from the earth out of oil wells, then it's refined and then it's burned, it's called carbon positive. Mm-hmm. In other words, it's adding carbon. We can stop the addition of carbon.
I think that's very good. And, here we are, 2017. we have a brand new president, and he may be there for 4 years, but there is a feeling that the government is collapsing and the services it provides. Do you see, I mean, for really seizing the opportunity of direct air capture of carbon, it's going to take big investments.
Yes.
And maybe big rewards. Someday these investments might lead to the creation of an industry that makes gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel that rivals the fossil fuel oil and gas industry. Do you expect any help from the government in the next 4 years?
All I can say is, God, I hope so. And I also want to say about the oil industry that we feel that because they are so big and powerful and they have so many billions and billions of dollars of reserve capital, we're not looking to rival them. What we want to do, what I want to do, and I believe most of my associates, is to work along with them and be able to give them a new opportunity for the oil well in the sky, where we can pull the ingredients for the oil, for the gasoline, the diesel, and the jet fuel, the carbon dioxide out of the sky. And they will be able to then help to limit the amount of new carbon dioxide that goes into the sky. There are a myriad of different ways that this can all be put together for business. The end result on this is a $1 trillion opportunity sitting in front of our globe. We can literally power all of the billion plus combustion engines that run our planes and our tanks and our boats and our cars, and et cetera. And it's sitting right here in front of us. You and I are in it right now. We're sitting in the oil well right now. I just inhaled 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide, which is too much, and it can be pulled out and it can be turned into gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. A lot of work, needs a lot of development. We need a lot of money. But that's what it all comes down to when you have a whole change in manufacturing process in society. You need the money, you need the people that are willing to put in the time and the effort, and then all of a sudden you can change things for the better.
Yeah. So we have this fantastic oil industry that you spoke of that really has tremendous amount of money, and some of those oil companies probably invest a bit in research and trying to keep their eye on people like you who are trying to develop new technology. But there has to be a lot of very powerful companies out there, like a Google, for example, that recognizes, they have the intellect to recognize where this planet is headed. And they might become a prospect to invest in helping to make the direct air capture of carbon dioxide marketplace take off.
I would love to be able to go speak with the people in Google or in Microsoft or in many other types of big businesses. I would love to be able to present myself and my associates. I'd bring my associates I know would come with me. If we thought that we could actually get in front of somebody, some organization that had the capital so that we could turn this into a reality of literally creating gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel out of thin air.
Yeah.
It's like magic. But it can be done. It's not real magic. Yeah. It's just been a whole lot of work to get to the point of being able to do it.
Yeah. When I listen to you, and I'm an artist, and I sometimes have started to see the globe, the planet, and right now I see all these oil wells drilling away at the earth and all this terrible smoke coming out of it. It is possible, maybe not in our lifetime, but down the road when we look at the planet the way I just did, we won't see all those oil wells digging into the earth and bringing up all this stuff that's harmful for our health and for the whole planet. Maybe we'll see a painting where we have structures on the earth that are just reaching up and pulling down this, in one respect, harmful substance, but this substance that can be used, as you pointed out, to make diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel.
Yeah, I agree with you. Eventually, there's going to be a change. There has to be a change, because if we don't change, then we're going to run into a climate collapse, into an environmental degradation because of the overheating of the planet and because of the pollution in the planet, that has a chance of literally putting a real big stop in front of the human race advancement.
Yes, and now I don't hold myself up as a scientist, but I have been blessed to have made about 50 TV shows with scientists around the world who are looking at the threat of increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Almost every one of them tends to say, we don't know if we've already put too much up there already for effects, harmful effects, to happen to us.
Correct.
It's that bad of a situation, as I think you know. And again, and what is the solution? Nobody out there, I was with George Schultz a couple of months ago, and he has a solution to help in this regard, but he is one of the first to say, we don't know how we're going to stop this increasing amount of greenhouse gases up there. There are a lot of solutions today, and relatively speaking, few drawdown ones. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that. We're in a massive problem right now. And the only way that a massive problem can be addressed is with a massive effort to address it. And the planet so far, unfortunately, the governments have not become ready to address this, to look at it honestly and open it up. Like, I kind of feel like they're all a bunch of Wizard of Oz behind a curtain with smoke and mirrors doing their things, and they won't admit that they've got to get rid of this smoke that's all over the place, which is basically pollution. And the carbon dioxide, the extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere doesn't hurt you and I to breathe. It helps plants to grow. The thing that it does is it is the initiator of climate warming that is an anthropogenic source, a human source.
Sure.
In that the carbon dioxide warms, it absorbs the solar energy, becomes warm, and because there's an extra amount of carbon dioxide, almost 2x now compared to what it was supposed to be to keep the climate in its regular pattern, that it's overheating the planet. The fact that when the carbon dioxide, being the initiator, because we put it in there, overheat by drilling oil and driving our cars and everything. And we didn't do this. We didn't mean to do this. We just were, a society, a bunch of societies growing up. Then they have what's called feed-ons that happen. So here's the carbon dioxide, too much carbon dioxide getting warmed by the sun. It's warming the atmosphere. Then the feed-ons come. One feed-on, and everybody's heard of them. The glaciers start to retreat. When the glaciers retreat, it exposes dark land. The dark land absorbs the sun energy, and again, it becomes a heater because it doesn't have the snow on top of the glacier anymore to reflect the sun. Then the ice sheets start to move off the ocean on the poles. Again, opens up dark water, water absorbs it. Then what happens? Well, we start to get evaporation that's happening in all of the lakes and the rivers and the seas. Sure. What happens? Evaporation creates higher humidity in the air. What does the humidity do? It absorbs the heat from the sun. So it's become sort of a self-motivating system of heating the planet. And we can't stop the evaporation unless we can cool the planet. We can't reinstate the ice on the water unless we cool the planet. And we can't put more glaciers back unless we cool the planet. But we can remove the carbon dioxide, the initiator. It's the only thing that I know that we can do. to help cool the planet. And it's going to take a massive effort. Some of it will be, some of the carbon dioxide that's removed will be used for products such as gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, also dry ice, and there'll be other things that carbon dioxide will be used for. And there's also going to be some big expenses on sequestration, putting it down in the oil wells and stuff, the vacant oil wells and salt mines.
All right, now you make some wonderful points. I have a question about you. Who really are you? What motivates you to be here and be an advocate for mining the skies? What is it? Are you out to make $1 billion on this in an investment or something?
Oh,
you
I
don't
wouldn't
have much time.
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad, but that's not the reason that I'm into it. I started with a solar air tower chimney specifically for creating electricity and potable water. And then I ran into these engineers and the physicists and the PhDs and the professors that showed me that they could collect the carbon dioxide. Then I studied it and I learned, this is 13, 14 years ago. Then I studied it and I learned, oh my God, we have to collect the carbon dioxide. We got to do. Then I found we could turn it into gasoline and everything else from people like Ellen Stechel, working for Sandia National Labs, and other things like that were happening. So it kind of grew. It grew its own legs. Originally, I was just going to make some money by making electricity and potable water, and now I realize this is serious, and I can help.
So you're an activist.
I'm an activist. Yeah.
Okay. So we have just a little more time left, and you've been a good guest.
Thanks. You've been a great interviewer.
And that's kind of you. And I just want to mention, maybe I'm going to see you on June 23rd. Maybe I'm not. But I'm going to be at the Silicon Valley Energy Summit at Stanford on June 23rd. And I'm going to display 2 huge paintings. One, Sustainable America in the Era of Trump. Trump will not like this painting. That'll be 24 foot. And then the other one I'm going to display is a 15-foot, 6-foot high painting, which will be George Shultz's plan. And he calls it's a Republican, GOP, conservative plan for helping to do what you firmly believe in, reduce carbon emissions, but he's not thinking about drawdown. He's thinking about trying to decrease the emissions that are. Okay.
Well, that sounds great. You're a wonderful artist too, by the way. I've seen plenty of your paintings.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoy it. And you live where?
I'm in San Geronimo, California.
San Geronimo. And that reminds me, we are in the CMCM Marin TV studio in Marin County. And I'm really happy to say that this organization invites me to come up here roughly every month, every quarter now, to make folks with people like you, who I know you live around here.
Yeah, I'm not far.
So Arthur, I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, I'm Michael Killen. Thank you for tuning in.